The train whistle pierced the autumn air as Tabitha Monroe clutched her worn leather bag tighter, the last fragments of her old life packed inside. The year was 1876, and the promise of a new beginning stood before her, if only she could summon the courage to step off the platform at Silver Creek Station, Wyoming Territory. The long journey from Boston had drained her of everything but determination. 3 days ago, she'd been the dutiful daughter of a bankrupt merchant. Now she was a mail-order bride, contracted to marry a cattle rancher she knew only through 6 exchanged letters and a daguerreotype that showed a stern-faced man 20 years her senior. Tabitha smoothed the wrinkles from her travel-worn dress, wondering if Henry Blackwood would find her as agreeable in person as he had in correspondence. The platform was nearly empty now, the other passengers having dispersed to waiting carriages or into the embrace of loved ones. Only Tabitha remained, standing alone with her single bag, the contract in her pocket feeling heavier than the trunk she'd sent ahead. "Reckon you're waiting on someone, miss?" The deep voice startled her. Tabitha turned to find herself looking up at a tall man leaning against a post, his features partially shadowed by a wide-brimmed hat. Unlike the Eastern gentleman she was accustomed to, everything about him spoke of the frontier, from his weathered leather vest to the pistol holstered at his hip. His boots were scuffed with the dust of hard travel, but his blue eyes were kind when they met hers. Yes, Mr. Henry Blackwood arranged for someone to collect me." Her voice sounded small, even to her own ears. The cowboy straightened, and she noticed a silver star pinned to his vest. "I'm Vincent Wade, Deputy Sheriff of Silver Creek." He removed his hat, revealing dark hair that curled slightly at the nape of his neck. "And you would be Miss Monroe?" "Yes." Tabitha felt a flutter of apprehension. "Is something wrong? Has Mr. Blackwood been delayed?" The deputy shifted his weight, his expression turning grim. "Miss Monroe, I'm afraid I have some difficult news. Henry Blackwood passed away 3 days ago. Heart gave out while he was working cattle." The world seemed to tilt beneath Tabitha's feet. "Dead?" The word barely escaped her lips. "But The arrangement—" Her knees weakened and she reached for the bench behind her. Vincent Wade moved quickly, catching her elbow to steady her. "Easy now, let's sit you down." He guided her to the bench, his touch respectful but firm. "I don't understand," Tabitha whispered once seated. "I have nowhere to go, no one expecting me." The reality crashed over her. She was alone in a strange town with less than $20 to her name. The deputy crouched down to meet her gaze. "Blackwood's lawyer asked me to meet you, explain the situation." He paused, studying her face with a depth of compassion that made her throat tighten. "Blackwood's nephew is taking over the ranch. The agreement you had, well, he doesn't feel obligated to honor it." "I see." Tabitha clutched her bag tighter, mind racing through impossible options. Return to Boston? Impossible. She'd spent nearly everything she had on the train ticket west. Find work? Perhaps, though she had few practical skills beyond basic household management and needlework. "The stage to Denver leaves tomorrow morning," Vincent offered. "The lawyer thought you might want passage back east. Blackwood's estate would cover it." "A transaction," Tabitha said softly, more to herself than to him. "That's all it ever was, I suppose." Vincent Wade rose to his full height, looking down at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Then, with a decisiveness that took her breath away, he said, "You deserve a home, not a transaction, Miss Monroe." The words hung between them, unexpected and powerful. "I beg your pardon?" Tabitha managed, uncertain she'd heard him correctly. "This town needs good people willing to put down roots," Vincent continued, "not just passing through or looking for quick fortune. There's the schoolhouse that needs a teacher, the mercantile looking for help, Mrs. Holloway at the hotel always needing an extra hand." He replaced his hat, adjusting it against the setting sun. "I'm saying you have options besides going back or marrying a stranger." Tabitha felt the first spark of something beyond despair. "You would help me?" "Why?" "Because Silver Creek takes care of its own. And the moment you stepped off that train, whether you knew it or not, you became one of us." He offered his hand. Let me at least take you to the hotel. Mrs. Holloway will see you settled for the night, and tomorrow you can decide what's next." Tabitha looked at his outstretched hand, calloused and strong. Everything in her upbringing warned against accepting such familiar help from a stranger. Yet something in Vincent Wade's steady gaze promised safety rather than danger. She placed her gloved hand in his. "Thank you, Deputy Wade." "Call me Vince," he replied with a smile that transformed his weathered face. "Everyone does." As they walked from the station toward the main street, Tabitha stealing glances at the man beside her, she couldn't have known that this unexpected meeting would forever alter the course of her life, or that the deputy who spoke of home rather than transactions would soon come to mean more to her than any contract ever could. The Silver Creek Hotel stood as a testament to frontier aspirations. 3 stories of painted clapboard with actual glass windows and a wide porch where men in varying states of trail dust congregated with evening pipes. Tabitha felt their curious gazes as Vincent escorted her up the steps, but his presence beside her served as both shield and introduction. "Mrs. Holloway," he called as they entered the lobby, his voice carrying through the modest but clean establishment. "Got a guest needing a room?" A stout woman with steel-gray hair emerged from a side door, wiping her hands on an apron. Her shrewd eyes took in Tabitha's travel-worn appearance and the single bag she carried. "You must be Henry Blackwood's intended," she said without preamble. "News travels fast in Silver Creek. Heard about his passing yesterday. Right shame, that." "This is Miss Tabitha Monroe," Vincent introduced formally. "She's had a long journey and just received the news. Thought you might have a room for her while she considers her options." Mrs. Holloway's expression softened. "Of course. Got a nice room on the 2nd floor with a view of the mountains." She shot Vincent a meaningful look. "On the house for tonight. Town hospitality." "That's very kind," Tabitha began. "But I can pay." "Nonsense," Mrs. Holloway interrupted. "First night's always free for newcomers. Town tradition." From the quick glance Vincent and Mrs. Holloway exchanged, Tabitha suspected this tradition had been invented on the spot, but gratitude overwhelmed her pride. "Thank you," she said simply. "I'll send up some hot water and supper shortly," Mrs. Holloway continued, retrieving a key from a hook behind the desk. "You look dead on your feet, poor thing. Train journey's no picnic, especially all the way from the east." Tabitha glanced at Vincent. "How did you know I came from the east?" A hint of a smile touched his lips. "Your accent. And those shoes weren't made for Wyoming dirt." She looked down at her once fine leather boots, now dusty and scuffed from travel. "I suppose not." Mrs. Holloway handed the key to Vincent. "Show her up to room 204, deputy. I'll have Mary bring up the hot water." As they climbed the stairs, Tabitha felt the weight of the day pressing down on her shoulders. The creaking wooden steps seemed to extend forever, each one requiring more effort than the last. "Almost there," Vincent encouraged, noticing her fatigue. He carried her bag despite her initial protests, his long strides slowed to match her tired pace. Room 204 was simple but clean, a narrow bed with a patchwork quilt, a washstand with a porcelain basin, a small writing desk beneath the window, and a rocking chair in the corner. To Tabitha's Eastern sensibilities, it seemed sparse, but the cleanliness and the view of mountains turning purple in the setting sun gave it an undeniable charm. Vincent set her bag on a small trunk at the foot of the bed. "Mrs. Holloway runs the cleanest establishment between Cheyenne and Salt Lake City. You'll be comfortable here." "Thank you for your kindness, Deputy Wade. I don't know what I would have done if Vince," he corrected gently, "and you don't need to thank me. Just doing what any decent person would." He moved toward the door, then hesitated. "Miss Monroe, I know this isn't what you planned, but Silver Creek isn't a bad place to make a fresh start. People look out for each other here." Tabitha's throat tightened with emotion. "I'll keep that in mind. I'll come by tomorrow morning, see how you're settling in. Maybe show you around town if you're feeling up to it." He touched the brim of his hat. "Rest well, Miss Monroe." After he departed, Tabitha sank onto the edge of the bed, finally allowing the tears she'd been fighting all day to fall. She cried for the life she'd left behind, for the future she'd thought awaited her, and for the uncertainty that now stretched before her. But when the tears subsided, she found herself looking out at the mountains, their rugged beauty unlike anything in Boston, and wondered if perhaps the deputy was right. Maybe Silver Creek was exactly where she needed to be. Morning arrived with golden light streaming through the window and the sounds of a frontier town coming to life wagon wheels on packed dirt. The blacksmith's hammer ringing, voices calling greetings across the street. Tabitha had slept deeper than expected, exhaustion overcoming the unfamiliar surroundings. She rose and performed her ablutions using the water left in the pitcher, then dressed in her second-best traveling outfit, a navy blue skirt and cream shirtwaist that had thankfully survived the journey with minimal wrinkles. Her auburn hair she twisted into a simple knot at the nape of her neck, practical rather than fashionable. A knock at the door announced Mary, Mrs. Holloway's young assistant, bearing a tray with coffee, biscuits, and preserves. "Mrs. Holloway thought you might like breakfast up here," the girl explained. "Deputy Wade said he'd call for you at 9 if that suits." "Thank you, that's very thoughtful." Tabitha accepted the tray, her stomach reminding her she'd eaten little the day before. "Everybody's talking about you," Mary said, lingering in the doorway with unconcealed curiosity. "We don't get many Eastern ladies here, especially not ones with education." Tabitha paused mid-pour. "How did you know I'm educated?" Mary shrugged. "Deputy Wade mentioned it, said you might be just what the school needs." Interesting that the deputy had made such an assumption, though not incorrect. Tabitha had indeed received more education than most women of her generation, thanks to her father's progressive views before financial ruin had changed everything. "The school needs a teacher?" she asked, curiosity piqued. "Going on 3 months now. Children are running wild with just Reverend Parker giving lessons twice a week." Mary's expression turned wistful. "I'd have liked schooling myself, but Pa needed me working since I was 12. The girl couldn't be more than 16 now, Tabitha realized. It's never too late to learn, Mary. Mary beamed at this, then remembered herself. "I'd best get back to work. Mrs. Holloway says idle hands are the devil's playground." After breakfast, Tabitha stood at the window watching Silver Creek begin its day. The town was larger than she'd initially thought, a proper main street with businesses on both sides, side streets with modest homes, a church steeple rising above the rooftops, and in the distance, rolling plains that stretched to the mountains. Precisely at 9, another knock came at her door. Vincent Wade stood in the hallway, his appearance notably tidier than the previous day. His dark hair was combed, his shirt fresh, though he still wore the same weathered leather vest with the deputy's star. "Morning, Miss Monroe. Hope you slept well." His smile was warm, genuine in a way that made her own lips curve in response. "Better than expected, thank you. Thought I'd show you around town, introduce you to some folks." He offered his arm in a gesture that seemed at odds with his frontier appearance. "If you're feeling up to it." Tabitha hesitated only briefly before placing her hand on his sleeve. "I would appreciate that. I should like to know what opportunities might be available here." They descended to the lobby where Mrs. Holloway gave them an approving nod. Outside, the morning sun was bright but not yet hot, the air crisp with the promise of autumn. "Silver Creek's not much compared to Boston," Vincent said as they started down the boardwalk. "But we've got most everything people need. Mercantile there." He pointed to a large storefront bank next door, blacksmith at the end of the street. Dr. Pearson's office is behind the apothecary. Best doctor in the territory, though he drinks more than he should since his wife passed. As they walked, Tabitha noticed how people greeted Vincent, men with respectful nods, women with warm smiles. He seemed to know everyone, exchanging words about family members, inquiring after ailments, reminding one young man about an unpaid fine. "You're well respected here," she observed. Vincent looked almost embarrassed. "Been deputy going on 5 years now. Sheriff Hargrove's getting on in years, so I handle most of the day-to-day work." He guided her across the street. "That there's the schoolhouse." The building was simple but sturdy. with a small bell tower atop the front entrance. Several children played in the yard despite the lack of formal classes. Mary mentioned they need a teacher, Tabitha said carefully. Vincent nodded. Last one left to get married in Denver. Town council's been looking for a replacement. They're particular, though, want someone who can teach more than just basic reading and figures. Latin and literature, too, for the older students. I studied Latin for 4 years, Tabitha found herself saying, and literature was always my favorite subject. Vincent stopped walking, turning to face her fully. Is that so? What about mathematics, geography, natural sciences? I'm proficient in arithmetic and algebra, though geometry was never my strength. Geography I know well. My father traded internationally before his business failed. As for natural sciences, I've read Darwin and Lyell, though many would consider that scandalous for a woman to admit. A slow smile spread across Vincent's face. Miss Monroe, I think we should pay a visit to Mayor Thornton right away. 2 hours later, Tabitha emerged from the mayor's office with a provisional appointment as Silver Creek's new schoolteacher, pending approval from the full town council at their meeting the following evening. The salary was modest, but included accommodations, a small cottage behind the schoolhouse previously occupied by teachers. I can't quite believe it, Tabitha said as Vincent walked her back toward the hotel. Yesterday I arrived as a mail-order bride, and today I'm to be a schoolteacher. Life has a way of taking unexpected turns out here, Vincent replied. The frontier doesn't much care about what was planned, only what needs doing and who's willing to do it. They paused outside the mercantile, where a display of calico fabrics caught Tabitha's eye. She would need appropriate clothing for her new position. Her Boston wardrobe, limited as it was after selling most of her belongings, wasn't suited for frontier teaching. Mind if we stop in? She asked. I should start preparing if I'm to begin classes next week. The bell above the door jingled as they entered the mercantile, a treasure trove of goods from practical necessities to modest luxuries. A balding man with spectacles perched on his nose looked up from behind the counter. Deputy Wade, he greeted, then his gaze shifted to Tabitha with undisguised curiosity. And this must be Miss Monroe. News travels fast in Silver Creek. He came around the counter, hand extended. Thomas Fleming, proprietor. My wife and I run the place. A pleasure, Mr. Fleming. Tabitha shook his hand. Here you might be our new schoolteacher. That's welcome news indeed. Got 2 boys myself who've been running wilder than usual without proper schooling. He gestured around the store. Whatever you need, you just let me know. We extend credit to town employees until the first month's wages come in. This unexpected kindness nearly brought tears to Tabitha's eyes. That's very generous. Not generosity, just good business, Fleming insisted, though his smile suggested otherwise. Can't have our teacher looking anything but proper, now can we? With Vincent offering occasional suggestions about practical considerations for Wyoming weather, Tabitha selected several lengths of sturdy fabric, buttons, thread, and other necessities. Fleming's wife emerged from the back room and, upon learning Tabitha's sewing skills were basic at best, offered to help with the more complicated garments. Community takes care of its own, Mrs. Fleming said, echoing Vincent's words from the previous day. Besides, I've been wanting to try some new patterns from Godey's Ladies' Book. By the time they left the mercantile, Tabitha's spirits had lifted considerably. The Flemings had promised to deliver her purchases to the hotel, refusing payment until her position was officially confirmed. I've never experienced such kindness from strangers, she confessed to Vincent as they continued their tour of the town. Out here, strangers don't stay strangers for long, he replied. Have to rely on each other too much for that. Speaking of which, he stopped outside a small but tidy building with sheriff painted above the door. Need to check in. Won't take but a minute if you'd like to wait. The sheriff's office was sparsely furnished, a desk piled with wanted posters and paperwork, a pot-bellied stove in the corner, 3 cells in the back currently empty. An older man with a silver mustache looked up from the desk. About time you showed your face, Wade, he grumbled, though there was no real heat in his tone. Been handling things myself all morning. Sorry, Sheriff. Been helping Miss Monroe get settled. Vincent performed introductions. Sheriff Hargrove, this is Miss Tabitha Monroe, likely our new schoolteacher. Miss Monroe, Sheriff James Hargrove. Hargrove stood, revealing a slight limp as he came around the desk to shake Tabitha's hand. Pleasure, madam. Here you're taking over the school. Good thing, too, those children need a firm hand. I hope I'm equal to the task, Tabitha replied. Hargrove studied her with shrewd eyes. You look like you've got backbone, Miss Monroe. That's what matters out here more than book learning. He turned to Vincent. Anything to report? Town's quiet. Figured I'd show Miss Monroe around, help her get oriented. Something passed between the two men, an unspoken communication that Tabitha couldn't quite interpret. Hargrove nodded slowly. Good thinking, Deputy. In fact, why don't you take the rest of the day? I can manage here. Vincent seemed surprised. You sure, Sheriff? Been managing this town since before you could shoot straight, boy? Think I can handle one afternoon. Hargrove winked at Tabitha. Besides, our new teacher needs a proper welcome to Silver Creek. Outside, Vincent looked slightly embarrassed. Sheriff's not usually so accommodating. Perhaps he's just being hospitable to a newcomer, Tabitha suggested, though she suspected there was more to it. Perhaps. Vincent didn't sound convinced. Well, since I'm apparently free for the day, would you like to see more of the area? There's a nice view of the valley from Miller's Ridge, not far from town. The invitation was forwarded by Boston standards. An unmarried woman riding out alone with a man she'd just met would cause whispers. But this wasn't Boston, and Tabitha was beginning to understand that frontier society operated by different rules. I'd like that, she decided, though I should warn you, I'm not much of a horsewoman. Vincent's laugh was warm and genuine. We'll take it slow, and I've got the gentlest mare in the livery for you. An hour later, they rode side by side along a winding trail that climbed gradually toward a ridge overlooking the valley. Tabitha sat astride a chestnut mare named Penny, who, true to Vincent's word, seemed content to follow his stallion with minimal guidance. The countryside was nothing like the manicured landscapes of Massachusetts here. Nature remained untamed, spectacular in its raw beauty. It's breathtaking, Tabitha said as they reached the ridge. Below them stretched the valley, Silver Creek a thin silver ribbon winding through golden grasslands. In the distance, cattle grazed on what she assumed was one of the territory's many ranches. Vincent dismounted and helped her down, his hands strong and sure at her waist. The brief contact sent an unexpected flutter through her, which she attributed to the exhilaration of the ride. That's Blackwood land down there, he said, pointing to the distant ranch. Or was. Suppose it belongs to his nephew now. Tabitha gazed at what might have been her future home. Strange to think that yesterday I believed I would be mistress of that ranch by week's end. Would that have made you happy? Vincent asked quietly. Marrying a man you'd never met? She considered the question honestly. Happy? No, but it would have been security. My father's debts left me with few options. She glanced at him. I imagine that seems very mercenary to you. Not mercenary, practical. Vincent's expression was thoughtful rather than judgmental. Out here, marriage is often as much about survival as sentiment, but that doesn't mean it has to stay that way. Your parents were they a love match? Tabitha asked, curious about the man beside her. Vincent smiled slightly. Eventually. My father was a trapper who saved my mother's wagon train from Sioux raiders. She always said she married him because he was the only man who could keep her safe in the wilderness. But I remember how they looked at each other. That wasn't just gratitude or practicality. And you? No wife waiting at home for the deputy? The question was bold, but Tabitha found herself wanting to know. No wife. Vincent leaned against a boulder, crossing his ankles. Came close once. Jeanette Pemberton, schoolteacher before last. We courted for nearly a year, but she couldn't abide the dangers of my job. Left for Denver, married a banker. I'm sorry, he shrugged. Don't be. She was right, being a lawman's wife isn't easy. never knowing if he'll come home, living with the responsibility he carries. His blue eyes met hers. Takes a special kind of woman to handle that life. The air between them seemed to thicken with unspoken possibility. Tabitha looked away first, flustered by the intensity of his gaze. "Tell me about the school," she said, changing the subject. "How many students will I have?" Vincent accepted the shift in conversation gracefully. "About 25 most days, ages 6 to 16. Mostly ranchers and townspeople's children, though we've got a few from the mining camp north of here when work slows in winter. They spent the afternoon talking about the town, its people, and the challenges of frontier education." Vincent proved knowledgeable about nearly every family in the area, providing insights that would prove invaluable when Tabitha met her students. As the sun began its descent, they reluctantly mounted their horses for the return journey. The ride back was companionable, Tabitha already more confident in the saddle. By the time they reached the livery stable, she felt as though she'd known Vincent Wade much longer than a single day. "Thank you for today," she said as he helped her dismount. "I feel much better prepared to face the town council tomorrow." "You'll do fine," he assured her. "They'd be fools not to hire you officially, and whatever else they might be. The council aren't fools." They walked back to the hotel together, the streets quieter as evening approached. Outside the hotel entrance, Vincent removed his hat, holding it before him. "Would you allow me to escort you to supper this evening? Mrs. Peterson runs a small cafe behind the apothecary. Nothing fancy, but the food's good." "I would like that," Tabitha replied, surprised by how much she meant it. "I'll return at 7 then." He replaced his hat with a smile that warmed his entire face. "Until later, Miss Monroe." Tabitha watched him walk away, his tall figure cutting a distinctive silhouette against the setting sun. Only yesterday she had arrived in Silver Creek expecting to meet her future husband. Instead, she'd found something unexpected, not just potential employment or a new community, but perhaps the first stirrings of something she'd never thought to find on the frontier. Something that felt remarkably like the beginning of a genuine home. 7 o'clock arrived with Tabitha waiting nervously in the hotel lobby, dressed in her best remaining outfit, a forest green traveling dress with modest lace trim at the collar and cuffs. She'd repinned her hair, allowing a few auburn curls to frame her face in what she hoped was a becoming but not improper manner. Mrs. Holloway, passing through with linens for the dining room, paused to give her an approving nod. "You look lovely, dear. The deputy won't know what hit him." Tabitha felt a blush rise to her cheeks. "It's merely a friendly supper, Mrs. Holloway." The older woman's knowing smile suggested she thought otherwise, but she merely continued on her way with an enigmatic, "Of course it is." Vincent arrived precisely on time, and Tabitha was struck again by how he managed to look both rugged and gentlemanly. He'd changed into a clean shirt and newer trousers, though he still wore his deputy's star and, she noticed, his holstered pistol. "Is that necessary for dinner?" she asked, indicating the weapon as they stepped onto the boardwalk. Vincent glanced down as if he'd forgotten it was there. "Force of habit. Never know when trouble might find you out here." His expression turned apologetic. "Makes you uncomfortable?" "No," Tabitha realized with some surprise. "It's simply different from what I'm accustomed to." "Lots of things are different here," Vincent acknowledged as they walked. "Some better, some worse, but all part of what makes this country what it is." Mrs. Peterson's cafe was small but inviting, with checkered tablecloths and kerosene lamps providing warm light. Several other diners were already seated, and Tabitha noticed the curious glances cast their way. Vincent seemed oblivious, guiding her to a table near the window. "Evening, Deputy Wade," called the stout woman Tabitha assumed was Mrs. Peterson. "This must be our new schoolteacher I've been hearing about." "Word travels fast," Tabitha murmured to Vincent. "Fastest thing in the territory," he agreed with a chuckle. After introductions, Mrs. Peterson proudly announced the evening's offerings: venison stew, fresh bread, and apple pie for dessert. "Made the pie special today," she told them with a wink. "Heard we had something to celebrate." The food was hearty and delicious, far better than Tabitha had expected in a frontier establishment. As they ate, conversation flowed easily between them. Vincent told stories of his early days as deputy, some humorous, others illuminating the challenges of maintaining law in a territory still finding its footing. In turn, Tabitha shared memories of her childhood in Boston, her father's shipping business, and her love of literature. "Never had much formal schooling myself," Vincent admitted. "Learned to read from my mother, arithmetic from keeping accounts at the trading post where we lived after my father died. Most of what I know came from books I picked up along the way." "Self-education is often the most meaningful," Tabitha said. "What do you enjoy reading?" Vincent looked almost embarrassed. "History, mostly. Ancient Rome, Greek philosophy. Sounds pretentious, I know." "Not at all," Tabitha countered, genuinely impressed. "Cicero or Seneca?" Vincent's eyebrows rose in surprise. "Both, though I prefer Seneca." "You've read them?" "My father believed daughters deserved education as much as sons would have, had he had any." She smiled at the memory. "He hired tutors until his business failed. After that, I continued on my own as best I could." Their discussion of classical literature drew interested looks from nearby diners, clearly surprised to hear such topics in Mrs. Peterson's cafe. By the time they finished their apple pie, truly exceptional. As promised, Tabitha realized they'd been talking for nearly 2 hours. "I've monopolized your evening," she said, suddenly conscious of the time. "Couldn't think of a better way to spend it," Vincent replied with a sincerity that made her heart beat faster. Outside, the night had turned cool, stars brilliant in the clear Wyoming sky. Vincent offered his arm again for the short walk back to the hotel. "Town council meets at 7 tomorrow evening," he reminded her. "I'll come by around 6:30 to escort you if that's agreeable." "Very much so. I admit I'm nervous about facing them all." "Don't be. You're exactly what Silver Creek needs." At the hotel entrance, he hesitated. "Miss Monroe, Tabitha, I hope you know that whatever the council decides, you have a friend in me. Silver Creek is my home, and I want it to become yours too." The simple honesty of his statement touched her deeply. "Thank you, Vincent. That means more than I can express." He took her hand, his touch warm and reassuring. "Good night, Tabitha. Sleep well." "Good night," she echoed, reluctantly withdrawing her hand. As she prepared for bed that night, Tabitha found herself thinking not of the council meeting or her prospective position, but of blue eyes that crinkled at the corners when their owner smiled, and the unexpected comfort she felt in the company of a man she'd known for just 2 days. The town council, comprising 5 of Silver Creek's most prominent citizens, voted unanimously to appoint Tabitha as the new schoolteacher the following evening. Mayor Thornton, a former judge from Pennsylvania, was particularly impressed with her classical education, while Mrs. Fleming from the Mercantile praised her sensible demeanor and Eastern refinement. "School's been closed too long," declared Mr. Watkins, the banker. "My Frederick's getting into mischief daily without proper learning to occupy him." And so, with surprising speed, Tabitha Monroe found herself with employment, accommodation, and a position of respect in a community that had been foreign to her just days before. The small teacher's cottage proved clean and comfortable, 2 rooms plus a kitchen, simply furnished but with unexpected touches like curtains at the windows and a bookshelf containing the town's modest educational library. Vincent helped her move in 2 days later, carrying her trunk and the packages from the Mercantile while offering suggestions for improvements to the cottage. "Roof needs checking before winter," he noted, glancing up at the ceiling. "And that front step's loose. I'll fix it this weekend if you'd like." "You've already done so much," Tabitha protested, arranging her few belongings on the dresser. "I can't impose further." "Not an imposition." Vincent leaned against the doorframe, watching her unpack. "Besides, can't have our teacher breaking an ankle on a loose step." Something in his tone made her look up. He was watching her with an expression that made her breath catch warmth, mixed with admiration, and something deeper she wasn't ready to name. School was set to begin the following Monday, giving Tabitha 4 days to prepare lessons and familiarize herself with the available materials. To her surprise, Silver Creek's educational resources were better than expected. A full set of McGuffey readers, arithmetic primers, a globe, wall maps, and even a small collection of classics and scientific texts donated by previous residents. The weekend before classes began, Vincent arrived as promised to repair the loose step and check the roof. He brought along a young man he introduced as Timothy Jenkins, son of the livery stable owner. "Tim's good with carpentry," Vincent explained. "Thought he might help make any adjustments you need inside while I handle the exterior work." Timothy, a lanky youth of about 17, proved not only skilled but also a wealth of information about her future students. As he built a shelf she'd requested for additional books, he cheerfully identified which children were troublemakers, which ones needed extra patience, and which families took education seriously. "The Patterson twins will test you right off," he warned. "They drove Miss Pemberton to tears twice, but they're smart as whips if you can channel that energy." "Thank you for the warning," Tabitha said, making mental notes. "What about the older students? Will they resent someone new?" Timothy considered this as he measured a board. "Some might. The older boys especially might think they know more than a woman teacher." He glanced up with an apologetic expression. "No offense meant, Miss Monroe." "None taken. It's a common prejudice." "Deputy Wade says you know Latin and such," Timothy continued. "That'll help. Most folks around here respect learning, even if they don't have much themselves." By late afternoon, the cottage had been transformed, the loose step fixed, roof secured against approaching winter, shelves built, and a wobbly table stabilized. Vincent insisted on checking the stove and chimney as well, cleaning out accumulated soot to prevent any danger of fire. "Don't want to lose our teacher to something preventable," he said, his face smudged with soot, but his smile still bright. As thanks for their work, Tabitha prepared a simple meal from supplies. Mrs. Holloway had sent over beans, cornbread, and preserved peaches. The three of them ate at her small table, Timothy regaling them with town gossip until Vincent reminded him of his evening chores at the livery. After the young man departed, Tabitha and Vincent sat in comfortable silence as twilight descended over Silver Creek. Through the open window came the sounds of the town settling for the evening distant piano music from the saloon, a mother calling children in for supper, the blacksmith's hammer falling silent at last. "Nervous about Monday?" Vincent asked, leaning back in his chair. "Terrified," Tabitha admitted with a small laugh. 25 children depending on me to shape their minds. What if I fail them?" "You won't." His certainty was reassuring. "You've got knowledge, patience, and something else that matters out here, adaptability. I've seen how quickly you've adjusted to Silver Creek. That same quality will serve you well in the classroom." His faith in her abilities warmed Tabitha more than she cared to admit. "I hope you're right." "Usually am," he said with a teasing grin. "About some things, anyway." As darkness fell, Vincent lit the lamps, their golden glow making the cottage feel even more like home. He lingered longer than strictly necessary, helping Tabitha arrange her teaching materials for Monday, offering suggestions about classroom discipline based on his observations of previous teachers. When he finally rose to leave, Tabitha walked him to the door, suddenly reluctant to see him go. "Thank you again for everything today. The cottage feels much more like home now." That was the goal. Vincent paused on the newly repaired step, turning back to face her. In the lamplight spilling from the doorway, his features seemed softer, his usually alert eyes gentle. "Tabitha, I know you've only been in Silver Creek a few days, but I was wondering if you might allow me to call on you properly, not just as the deputy helping a newcomer, but as a man who greatly admires a woman." The directness of his request took her breath away. In Boston, courtship followed rigid protocols with formal introductions and chaperoned visits. But here, standing in the doorway of her frontier cottage with stars emerging overhead, those conventions seemed as distant as the city itself. "I would like that very much," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. Vincent's smile could have lit the Wyoming night. "Good. That's good." He seemed momentarily at a loss for words, then recovered himself. Perhaps after you've had a chance to settle into teaching? Sunday dinner if you're not too exhausted from your first week? Sunday would be perfect. He nodded, suddenly formal again. Until Sunday, then. Good night, Miss Monroe. Good night, Deputy Wade. Tabitha watched him walk away, his tall figure disappearing into the darkness toward town. Only when she could no longer see him did she close the door, leaning against it with a mixture of excitement and trepidation. In less than a week, her life had transformed completely from mail-order bride to schoolteacher, from stranger to community member, from lonely traveler to a woman being courted by a man unlike any she'd known in Boston. Silver Creek was becoming home in ways she'd never anticipated. Monday morning arrived with bright sunshine and a knot of anxiety in Tabitha's stomach. She dressed carefully in one of the new outfits Mrs. Fleming had helped create, a practical navy skirt and white shirtwaist with a lace collar that was both professional and feminine. Her hair she arranged in a simple chignon, appropriate for a teacher, but not severe. The schoolhouse bell had been silent too long, and as Tabitha rang it promptly at 8 o'clock, she felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders. Children began arriving immediately, some running eagerly, others dragging their feet, all eyeing her with undisguised curiosity. "Good morning," she greeted each one at the door. "I'm Miss Monroe, your new teacher." By 8:30, all 23 expected students had arrived, the Patterson twins Timothy had warned her about, clearly identifiable by their matching mischievous grins. The banker's son, Frederick, properly dressed but fidgeting constantly. 5 Thornton children ranging from 6 to 16, an assorted offspring of ranchers, shopkeepers, and miners. "Welcome," Tabitha began, standing before them with what she hoped was an expression of confident authority. "I'm pleased to be your new teacher. We have much to accomplish this term, but I believe learning should be as enjoyable as it is necessary." The younger children looked interested, the middle group skeptical, and the older boys outright doubtful. One of them, a tall youth of about 15, raised his hand immediately. "Yes, Mr. James Blackwood." "Madam?" The boy's voice carried a hint of challenge. "Any relation to Henry Blackwood?" A ripple of whispers passed through the classroom. Tabitha maintained her composure, though her heart raced at the unexpected connection. "I was contracted to marry Mr. Blackwood before his unfortunate passing," she acknowledged calmly. "However, we never met in person." James Blackwood's expression was unreadable. "My uncle. He never mentioned a bride coming." Understanding dawned. This must be the nephew Vincent had mentioned, or more likely his son, the heir to the Blackwood Ranch, who had no obligation to honor Henry's agreement with her. "I'm sorry for your loss," Tabitha said sincerely. "Now, shall we begin our lessons? We have much ground to cover." The morning proceeded better than she dared hope. After initial testing to determine each student's level, Tabitha divided them into groups for reading and arithmetic. The younger children responded well to her encouraging approach, while the middle group appreciated her clear explanations of mathematical concepts. The older students, particularly James Blackwood and his 2 friends, remained reserved but not disruptive. By lunchtime, Tabitha felt cautiously optimistic about her new position. As the children ate their packed lunches in the schoolyard, Tabitha noticed Vincent approaching on horseback. He dismounted near the fence, tipping his hat to her as she went to greet him. "How's the first day going?" he asked, his expression concerned. "No mutiny yet?" "Not yet," she replied with a smile. "Though I did have an unexpected introduction to James Blackwood." Vincent's expression shifted subtly. "Ah, should have warned you about that. James is Henry's great-nephew, actually, his brother's grandson. Smart boy, but has a chip on his shoulder since his father died 2 years ago. Henry was raising him." He seemed surprised about my connection to his uncle. Henry was a private man. Vincent glanced toward the schoolyard where James sat apart from the other children. "James has had a rough time. Lost his mother young, then his father to a mining accident. Now, Henry. Ranch is in trust for him until he turns 21, with his cousin managing it meantime." This additional context helped Tabitha understand the boy's reserved demeanor. "Thank you for telling me. I'll keep it in mind." Vincent shifted his weight. suddenly looking slightly embarrassed. Actually came by to bring you this. He reached into his saddlebag and withdrew a small package wrapped in brown paper. Thought you might need it. Curious, Tabitha unwrapped the package to find a small brass bell, perfect for summoning attention in the classroom without having to raise her voice. The last teacher mentioned wanting one, Vincent explained. Found this in Cheyenne last month but never got around to giving it to her before she left. Thought you might find it useful. The thoughtfulness of the gesture touched Tabitha deeply. It's perfect. Thank you. Their eyes met, and for a moment the schoolyard, the children, even Silver Creek itself seemed to fade away. Then, a shout from the Patterson twins as they tussled over a marble game broke the spell. Better get back to keeping the peace, Tabitha said reluctantly. Vincent nodded. Same here. Town doesn't police itself. He mounted his horse with practiced ease. Still on for Sunday? Absolutely. As he rode away, Tabitha clutched the small bell, already treasuring it not just for its practicality, but for what it represented Vincent's continuing thoughtfulness and support as she built her new life in Silver Creek. The remainder of the week passed in a blur of lessons, getting to know her students, and settling into the rhythm of the small frontier town. By Friday, Tabitha had established clear routines in her classroom, identified which students needed extra attention, and begun to feel more confident in her role. James Blackwood remained reserved, but proved to be one of her brightest students, particularly in mathematics and history. On Friday afternoon, he lingered after the final bell as other students rushed out to begin their weekend. Miss Monroe, he began awkwardly, I wanted to apologize for how I spoke on Monday. Wasn't respectful. Tabitha set aside the papers she'd been gathering. Thank you, James. I appreciate that. The boy shifted his weight from one foot to another. Uncle Henry never said much about personal matters. Guess that's why I didn't know about you. He glanced up, his expression earnest beneath his usual guarded exterior. Did you want to marry him? The direct question caught Tabitha off guard. After a moment's consideration, she decided honesty was best. I never met your Uncle James. We corresponded by letter for several months. I agreed to marry him because I needed security after my father's death, and he wrote that he needed a wife to help manage his household. It was to be a practical arrangement, beneficial to us both. James nodded slowly. Uncle Henry was practical, not much for sentiment. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. But fair. Always fair. I'm sorry I never got to meet him, Tabitha said gently. From his letters, I believe he was a good man. He was. James glanced toward the window. Cousin William's nothing like him. Just waiting till he can sell the ranch once I'm grown. Says cattle are too much work. The boy's concern for his inheritance was clear. Before Tabitha could respond, the schoolhouse door opened and Vincent stepped inside. Afternoon, Miss Monroe. James. He nodded to the boy. Didn't mean to interrupt. Deputy Wade. James straightened, his moment of vulnerability disappearing behind a mask of teenage stoicism. Just leaving, sir. He grabbed his books and headed for the door, pausing briefly. Thanks for listening, Miss Monroe. After James departed, Vincent raised an eyebrow. Everything all right? I think so. He was asking about his uncle. Tabitha began organizing the classroom for Monday. He seems concerned about the ranch's future. Vincent moved to help her stack readers on the shelf. With good reason. William Blackwood's made no secret of his distaste for ranching. Word is he's already talking to Eastern investors. He shook his head. Shame. Henry built that spread from nothing. Meant it for James. Isn't there anything that can be done? Terms of Henry's will are clear. William manages until James turns 21. Another 6 years. Vincent replaced the last book and turned to face her. Unless William violates the terms of the trust somehow, James is at his mercy. Tabitha thought of the reserved boy who'd shown such vulnerability moments ago. That hardly seems fair. Many things out here aren't fair, Vincent acknowledged, but people find ways to survive, even thrive. His expression softened. Speaking of which, how's your first week been? Ready to board the next train east yet? Hardly, Tabitha replied with a smile. Despite a few challenges, I find I'm quite enjoying teaching. The children are bright and eager to learn, for the most part. Glad to hear it. Town's already talking about the positive changes you've made. Vincent leaned against her desk. Mrs. Thornton mentioned her daughters actually wanted to do their reading last night, called it a miracle. Tabitha laughed. Hardly a miracle, just a matter of finding material that interests them. Still on for Sunday dinner? Vincent asked, his tone casual, though his eyes betrayed his interest in her answer. I've been looking forward to it all week, Tabitha admitted, surprising herself with her candor. Vincent's smile was worth the moment of vulnerability. Good. Thought I'd take you to my place if that's agreeable. Nothing fancy, but I'm told my venison stew is passable. You cook? Tabitha couldn't hide her surprise. Man living alone learns to feed himself or starves, Vincent replied with a chuckle. Though I won't pretend to be as skilled as Mrs. Peterson. I'm sure it will be wonderful. Tabitha gathered her papers. What time should I expect you? Around noon. Thought we might take the long way, show you a bit more of the area. That sounds perfect. As they walked together toward her cottage, Tabitha realized how naturally they'd fallen into step with each other. In just a week, Vincent Wade had become not just her guide to Silver Creek, but a steadfast presence she found herself increasingly relying upon, and not merely for practical assistance. Sunday dawned clear and crisp, with a hint of autumn in the air that hadn't been present when Tabitha first arrived in Silver Creek. She dressed carefully in her best remaining dress, a dark burgundy with modest trim that flattered her auburn hair. Mrs. Holloway had helped her adjust the fit the previous evening, tisking over the Boston tailoring that hadn't accounted for the practicalities of frontier life. Too tight in the shoulders, the older woman had declared. Can't gather eggs or hang washing in a dress cut like that. Not that Tabitha expected to be gathering eggs at Vincent's home, but the adjustment did make the garment more comfortable. She pinned her hair in a style that was neat but softer than her teaching arrangement, allowing a few curls to frame her face. Precisely at noon, Vincent arrived on horseback, leading a second mount, the gentle mare Penny that Tabitha had ridden before. He himself rode a magnificent black stallion that pranced impatiently as its rider dismounted. "Thunder's showing off," Vincent said with a grin, patting the horse's neck. "Knows there's a lady watching." "He's beautiful," Tabitha said, approaching carefully to stroke the stallion's nose. "As is Penny. Thank you for bringing her again. Thought you might be more comfortable with a familiar mount?" Vincent helped her into the saddle with practiced ease, his hands strong and sure at her waist. "Ready for that tour I promised?" They rode west from town, following a winding trail that led through rolling grasslands dotted with stands of aspen, now turning golden. Vincent pointed out landmarks, distant ranches, a creek that offered the best fishing in the territory, mountains whose names reflected their first inhabitants long before white settlers arrived. The Arapaho called that one Sleeping Bear, he explained, indicating a mountain whose profile did indeed resemble a reclining bear. Their stories say it was once a great chief who sacrificed himself to protect his people from a harsh winter. "You know a great deal about the native peoples," Tabitha observed. Vincent nodded. "My mother was 1/4 Shoshone. Her grandmother taught her their stories, and she passed them to me." He glanced at her as if gauging her reaction. "Not something I mentioned to everyone in town." "Thank you for trusting me with it," Tabitha said, understanding the significance of his disclosure. Prejudice against native heritage existed in the West just as it did in the East, perhaps even more pronounced in these borderlands where conflict between settlers and indigenous tribes remained fresh in memory. "You're easy to trust," Vincent replied simply. "Saw that the moment you stepped off that train." The directness of his statement warmed Tabitha more than the autumn sunshine. They continued riding, cresting a small rise that revealed a modest cabin nestled in a grove of aspens beside a meandering stream. Smoke rose from the stone chimney, and a small corral stood to one side. "Home," Vincent announced. "Nothing grand, but it suits me." As they drew closer, Tabitha could see that while the cabin was indeed simple, it had been built and maintained with careful attention. The logs were well fitted, The small porch swept clean, windows gleaming in the sunlight. A patch of turned earth nearby suggested a garden, now harvested for the approaching winter. "It's lovely," she said sincerely. "How long have you lived here?" "Built it 5 years ago. After becoming deputy." Vincent helped her dismount. "Added to it bit by bit since then. Started as just one room, now has 3 plus the root cellar." Inside, the cabin was surprisingly comfortable. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a stone fireplace, a solid table with 4 chairs, and a pair of leather armchairs that looked well used but cared for. Bookshelves lined one wall, filled not just with the practical manuals one might expect, but with volumes of history, philosophy, and literature. "Your library is impressive," Tabitha said, running her fingers along the spines. "Plutarch, Shakespeare, Thoreau." "Reading passes the winter evenings," Vincent replied, though she detected a hint of pride in his voice. "Make yourself comfortable while I see to the stew." The promised venison stew was indeed more than passable, rich with tender meat, root vegetables from Vincent's garden, and herbs that filled the cabin with a mouth-watering aroma. Fresh bread accompanied it, along with preserved peaches for dessert. "This is delicious," Tabitha said after her first bite. "You've been modest about your culinary skills." Vincent looked pleased. "Hunting provides the meat, garden the vegetables. Just a matter of not ruining what nature provides." As they ate, conversation flowed easily between them. Vincent described how he'd come to Silver Creek after years of drifting through the territories, finding in the small community a place he wanted to put down roots. Tabitha shared more about her life in Boston, her father's business failures, and the difficult decisions that had led her to become a mail-order bride. "Do you regret it?" Vincent asked as they finished their meal. "Coming west, I mean, even though things didn't work out as planned." Tabitha considered the question thoughtfully. "A week ago I might have said yes. I was frightened, alone in a strange place with my plans in shambles." She met his gaze across the table. "But now? No, I don't regret it at all." Something shifted in Vincent's expression, a softening, a warmth that made Tabitha's heart beat faster. He reached across the table, his hand covering hers. "I'm glad you stayed," he said quietly. "Selfish as it might be to say, I can't imagine Silver Creek without you now." The simple honesty of his words touched Tabitha deeply. In Boston, courtship involved elaborate declarations and formal promises. Here, with autumn sunlight streaming through the cabin windows and the scent of pine and wood smoke in the air, Vincent's straightforward sentiment meant more than any flowery speech. "I can't imagine being anywhere else," she replied, turning her hand to lace her fingers with his. They remained that way for a long moment, connected by more than just their clasped hands. Then Vincent gently withdrew, rising to clear the dishes. Tabitha moved to help him, and they worked side by side in comfortable domesticity, their occasional touches seemingly accidental but increasingly welcome. Afterward, Vincent showed her the rest of his property, the corral where Thunder and 2 other horses dozed in the afternoon sun, the root cellar stocked for winter, the garden now mostly harvested but still yielding late squash and root vegetables. "It's not much," he said as they completed the tour, "but it's mine. Built with my own hands, paid for with honest work." "It's wonderful," Tabitha said sincerely. "You've created something real here, Vincent, something lasting." He looked at her with an intensity that made her breath catch. Still building, still have plans for the future. The implication hung between them, unspoken but unmistakable. As the afternoon light began to fade, they reluctantly prepared for the ride back to town. Vincent helped Tabitha mount Penny, his hands lingering at her waist longer than strictly necessary. The return journey was quieter, both of them lost in thought as they rode side by side through the gathering dusk. Stars were beginning to appear by the time they reached Tabitha's cottage, the lamps in Silver Creek's windows creating a welcoming glow against the darkening sky. Vincent insisted on seeing Tabitha safely inside, lighting her lamps and checking that the stove had enough wood for the increasingly cool nights. His domestic concern touched her deeply. This man who wore a deputy's star and carried a gun moved with gentle care through her small home, ensuring her comfort and safety. At the door, he paused, hat in hand. "Thank you for today, Tabitha. Having you in my home, it felt right." "It did," she agreed softly. "Thank you for sharing it with me." Vincent stepped closer, his eyes searching hers. "I know it's only been a short time, but I find myself thinking about you constantly. Your courage in coming west alone, your kindness with the children, your smile." He took a deep breath. "I'd like to continue calling on you if you're amenable." In the lamplight, his features were both strong and gentle, his blue eyes earnest. Tabitha knew the proper response would be measured, cautious. They had known each other such a short time after all. But propriety seemed less important than honesty in this moment. "I'd like that very much," she said. "In fact, I hope you will." Relief and joy transformed his expression. Vincent took her hand, raising it slowly to his lips. The gentle press of his kiss against her knuckles sent a thrill through Tabitha, unlike anything she'd experienced before. "Good night, Tabitha Monroe," he said, his voice low. "Sweet dreams." "Good night, Vincent," she replied, reluctant to close the door between them, but knowing it was proper to do so. As she prepared for bed that night, Tabitha found herself humming softly, her thoughts full of a cabin nestled among aspens and the man who had built it with his own hands. She had come to Wyoming territory seeking security through marriage to a stranger. Instead, she'd found possibility in the most unexpected of places, a small frontier town and the steady gaze of its deputy sheriff. The following weeks brought a rhythm to Tabitha's life in Silver Creek. Weekdays were devoted to her students, whose progress increasingly rewarded her efforts. The Patterson twins, while still mischievous, had channeled their energy into a competitive race to master multiplication tables. Frederick Watkins revealed an unexpected talent for geography, while James Blackwood's essays on historical figures showed insight beyond his years. Sundays became precious time with Vincent. Sometimes they rode into the countryside, exploring the territory around Silver Creek. Other days, they simply enjoyed each other's company in town, attending church services together, sharing meals at Mrs. Peterson's cafe, or reading companionably in Tabitha's cottage during increasingly frequent autumn rainstorms. October brought the first frost, and with it, preparations for winter. The town organized a harvest festival, transforming the town square into a celebration of the year's bounty before the harsh Wyoming winter set in. Tables groaned with food contributed by every household, musicians played fiddles and harmonicas, and lanterns illuminated dancers as darkness fell. Vincent found Tabitha supervising a group of her students who were performing recitations for the assembled townspeople. She wore a new dress made from fabric purchased at the Mercantile Deep Blue that highlighted her auburn hair, now styled in a becoming arrangement of curls. "Miss Monroe," he greeted her formally, mindful of the children nearby. "Your students are doing you credit." "Thank you, Deputy Wade," she replied with equal formality, though her eyes sparkled with private meaning. "They've worked very hard on their presentations." Once the recitations concluded and the children dispersed to the food tables, Vincent offered Tabitha his arm. "Might I interest you in some of Mrs. Peterson's apple cider? I hear she's added a special spice blend this year." As they strolled through the festival, Tabitha was struck by how many people greeted her by name, inquired after her comfort as winter approached, or praised her work with their children. In just over a month, she had become part of the community in ways she'd never experienced in Boston. "You're popular," Vincent observed as they accepted mugs of steaming cider. "Whole town's talking about the improvements at school." "Hardly my doing alone," Tabitha demurred. "The children simply needed structure and encouragement." "And a teacher who cares," Vincent added, "makes all the difference." As evening deepened, musicians began playing dance tunes, and couples formed sets in the cleared area before them. Vincent set aside his empty mug, extending his hand to Tabitha. Would you honor me with a dance, Miss Monroe? The formality of his request, combined with the warmth in his eyes, made Tabitha's heart flutter. I would be delighted, Deputy Wade. Vincent proved to be a surprisingly graceful dancer, guiding Tabitha through the steps with confidence. As they moved together, other dancers and onlookers exchanged knowing glances. The deputy's courtship of the new schoolteacher had become Silver Creek's favorite topic of gentle gossip. "Everyone's watching us," Tabitha murmured as they turned in the dance. "Let them," Vincent replied, his hand warm at her waist. "I'm proud to be seen with you." The simple declaration warmed Tabitha more than the dancing or cider had. As the music slowed to a waltz, Vincent drew her slightly closer, still proper but more intimate than their previous steps. "I've been meaning to ask you something," he said, his voice low enough that only she could hear. "The Thanksgiving holiday approaches. I thought you might join me at my cabin for dinner. Mrs. Holloway has invited us both to her gathering at the hotel, but I selfishly find myself wanting time alone with you." The invitation, coming after weeks of careful courtship, always conducted in public or with open doors, represented a significant step. Tabitha felt a flutter of both excitement and apprehension. "People might talk," she said softly. "They already do." Vincent's eyes held hers steadily. "But if you'd prefer Mrs. Holloway's gathering, I understand completely." Tabitha considered for a moment. In Boston, such an arrangement would be scandalous, but Silver Creek operated by different rules, and she had come to trust Vincent implicitly. "I would be honored to share Thanksgiving with you," she decided. "Perhaps we could attend Mrs. Holloway's gathering in the evening?" "I wouldn't want to disappoint her entirely." Vincent's smile was worth any potential gossip. "A perfect compromise. I'll ensure your return to town with your reputation intact, Miss Monroe." The music ended, and Vincent reluctantly released her, though his eyes conveyed that his thoughts remained focused entirely on her. As they moved away from the dancing area, Sheriff Hargrove approached, his expression unusually serious. "Wade, got a situation that needs attention," he said without preamble. "Ryder just came in from the Blackwood Ranch. Some trouble with cattle rustlers hitting the north pasture." Vincent's demeanor shifted immediately, deputy's duty replacing the relaxed dancer of moments before. "Anyone hurt?" "Not yet. But William Blackwood's threatening to take matters into his own hands if we don't intervene." Hargrove glanced at Tabitha apologetically. "Sorry to interrupt your evening, Miss Monroe." "Of course," Tabitha said immediately. "Please don't worry about me." Vincent turned to her, clearly torn between duty and courtesy. "I need to see to this. May I escort you home first?" "I'll be fine," she assured him. "Mrs. Fleming mentioned walking home together when the festival ends. Please go where you're needed." He hesitated, then nodded. "I'll call on you tomorrow, let you know what happened." He took her hand briefly. "Thank you for understanding." As Vincent strode away with Sheriff Hargrove, Tabitha watched his retreating figure with a mixture of admiration and concern. The reminder of the dangers inherent in his position riding out to confront potential rustlers in the night sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the autumn air. "He'll be fine," came a voice beside her. Mrs. Holloway had approached without Tabitha noticing. "Been handling situations like this for years. Man knows what he's doing." "I'm sure you're right," Tabitha replied, trying to sound more confident than she felt. Mrs. Holloway patted her arm. "Part of loving a lawman, dear. Learning to sleep while they're riding into trouble." The older woman's casual reference to loving startled Tabitha, though she didn't correct the assumption. Was that what this was, love? The constant thoughts of Vincent, the joy in his presence, the concern for his safety? She had never experienced such feelings before, having always approached potential suitors in Boston with practical consideration rather than emotional investment. "Come help me serve the pies," Mrs. Holloway suggested, sensing Tabitha's disquiet. "Keep your mind occupied." The remainder of the evening passed in a blur of activity, though Tabitha found her thoughts repeatedly turning to Vincent, wondering where he was, if he was safe. She walked home with the Flemings as planned, grateful for their cheerful company that prevented her from dwelling too much on potential dangers. Morning brought no word from Vincent, and Tabitha prepared for school with a sense of unease. The children were still excited from the previous night's festivities, making concentration difficult for both teacher and pupils. Near midday, a commotion outside drew their attention, hoofbeats and voices raised in the street. "Continue with your reading," Tabitha instructed, moving to the window. Outside, several riders were dismounting in front of the sheriff's office, Vincent among them. Relief flooded through her at the sight of him, apparently unharmed. Then she noticed James Blackwood slipping from his seat and moving toward the door. "James," she called gently, "is everything all right?" The boy looked torn between his studies and the scene outside. "That's my cousin William with the deputies. Something's happened at the ranch." Tabitha made a quick decision. "Class, please continue reading Chapter 3 quietly. I'll return shortly." She gestured to James. "Come with me, please." Together they stepped outside, approaching the gathering at the sheriff's office. Vincent noticed them immediately, breaking away from the group to meet them. "Everything all right at the school?" he asked, his expression concerned. "James saw the commotion," Tabitha explained. "We were worried." Vincent's expression softened as he looked at the boy. "Caught the rustlers, James. 4 of them, working for the Casey outfit trying to expand their territory. Sheriff's got them locked up now." "The cattle?" James asked, his concern for the ranch's assets evident. "Most recovered. Lost a few head, but your cousin did good work spotting the problem early." Vincent placed a reassuring hand on the boy's shoulder. "Your uncle would be proud." James seemed to stand taller at the words. "Can I see the rustlers?" "Not now. Sheriff's questioning them." Vincent glanced at Tabitha. "Best get back to your lessons." "Everything's under control." As James reluctantly headed back to the schoolhouse, Tabitha lingered. "You're unharmed?" she asked quietly. Vincent's expression warmed. "Not a scratch. Sorry I couldn't send word earlier. Been a long night." "I'm just glad you're safe." Tabitha realized how much she meant those words. The relief of seeing him whole and unharmed was overwhelming. Vincent's gaze held hers intently. "Was thinking of you the whole ride back. How much I wanted to see your face again." The simple declaration made Tabitha's heart race. Before she could respond, Sheriff Hargrove called from the office doorway. "Wade, need you in here." "Duty calls," Vincent said with a rueful smile. "See you this evening? Once things settle here?" "I'll be home," Tabitha promised, reluctant to leave him, but knowing they both had responsibilities to attend to. The remainder of the school day passed slowly, Tabitha's thoughts repeatedly drifting to Vincent, despite her best efforts to focus on her lessons. When she finally dismissed the children, she hurried home to freshen up before his promised visit. Evening shadows were lengthening when a knock came at her door. Vincent stood on the porch, freshly shaved and wearing a clean shirt despite the fatigue evident in his stance. "You should be resting," Tabitha chided gently, ushering him inside. "You've been up all night." "Couldn't rest without seeing you first," he replied simply. "Needed to make sure you weren't worried." "Of course I was worried," Tabitha admitted, guiding him to sit at her small table where she'd prepared a simple meal, anticipating his hunger after the long night and day. "That's part of caring for someone." Vincent's eyes met hers, something profound and unspoken passing between them. "Yes, it is." As they shared the meal, Vincent related the events of the night, the tracking of the rustlers, the confrontation, the arrests. He downplayed any danger, though Tabitha suspected the reality had been more perilous than he described. "William Blackwood's behavior was concerning," Vincent admitted. "Too eager to use his rifle rather than let the law handle things. Had to remind him forcibly that vigilante justice isn't tolerated in this county." "How did he respond?" "Not well. Man has a temper." Vincent frowned. Never liked how Henry appointed him as James's guardian. Too interested in the ranch's profits. Not enough in its legacy or the boy's welfare. As they finished eating, Vincent's exhaustion became increasingly evident. Tabitha insisted he rest in her armchair while she cleared the dishes. He protested weakly, but was asleep almost as soon as he settled into the chair, his features relaxing in slumber. Tabitha watched him for a moment, struck by the vulnerability of this strong man who carried such responsibility. She gently covered him with a quilt, then moved quietly about the cottage, completing her evening tasks while allowing him to rest. An hour later, Vincent woke with a start, momentarily confused. "I'm sorry," he said, sitting up straighter. "Didn't mean to fall asleep on you." "You needed it," Tabitha replied, setting aside her mending. "Feel better?" "Much." He rose, stretching slightly. "Though I should go. Getting late and I've imposed enough." "You haven't imposed at all," Tabitha assured him, moving to stand before him. "I'm glad you came." In the lamplight, Vincent's gaze was warm as it traveled over her features. "Tabitha, these past weeks—" He hesitated, then continued with characteristic directness. "I need you to know that my intentions are serious. I'm not just calling on you to pass the time or because you're new in town. I care for you deeply." Tabitha's heart raced at his declaration. "I care for you too, Vincent, more than I thought possible in such a short time." He took her hands in his touch gentle but sure. "I know it's too soon to speak of forever. You're still settling here, finding your place. But I want you to know that's where my thoughts are heading." "Mine too," she admitted softly. Vincent's smile was tender as he raised one hand to cup her cheek. "May I kiss you, Tabitha Monroe?" "Yes," she whispered, her pulse quickening as he leaned closer. His lips met hers in a gentle kiss that conveyed both restraint and deep emotion. Tabitha had been kissed before proper brief touches from Boston suitors, but nothing had prepared her for the warmth that spread through her at Vincent's kiss, the rightness of his touch. When they parted, Vincent rested his forehead against hers for a moment. "Been wanting to do that since I first saw you standing on that platform with your bag," he confessed. "I'm glad you waited," Tabitha replied with a smile. "But not too long." Vincent reluctantly stepped back, though he kept hold of her hands. "I should go, much as I'd rather stay." "Will you come for supper tomorrow?" Tabitha asked. "After you've had proper rest?" "Try and stop me," he replied with a grin that made him look younger, unburdened by responsibility. At the door, he kissed her once more, this time with slightly less restraint, leaving Tabitha breathless and flushed. "Good night, Tabitha. Sweet dreams." "Good night, Vincent." After he departed, Tabitha pressed her fingers to her lips, still feeling the imprint of his kiss. In her wildest imaginings of what awaited her in Wyoming territory, she had never envisioned this, not just security or purpose, but the beginning of something that felt remarkably like the love stories she'd read, but never expected to experience. The weeks leading up to Thanksgiving brought increasingly cold weather to Silver Creek. The first snow dusted the mountains visible from the schoolhouse windows, and morning frost coated the ground, crunching beneath boots and wagon wheels. Inside the schoolhouse, the pot-bellied stove became the center of activity, children gravitating toward its warmth during lessons. Vincent's courtship of Tabitha continued with steadfast devotion, their feelings deepening with each shared conversation, each brief moment of privacy between his duties and her teaching. The town observed their growing attachment with approval, the respected deputy and the dedicated schoolteacher forming a match that seemed both practical and, increasingly obviously, based on genuine affection. 3 days before Thanksgiving, disaster struck the schoolhouse when the ancient stove's chimney pipe collapsed during the night, sending soot throughout the room and rendering it unusable until repairs could be made. Mayor Thornton inspected the damage and declared classes suspended until after the holiday. "Can't have the children freezing or breathing soot," he pronounced. "Take the unexpected holiday, Miss Monroe. You've earned it." The news spread quickly through town, and Vincent appeared at Tabitha's cottage that afternoon with an unexpected proposal. "Since you're suddenly free from teaching, I wondered if you might consider coming to my cabin early for Thanksgiving," he suggested. "I need to ride out to check on some isolated homesteads before the weather turns worse. Thought you might come along, see more of the territory. We could return in time for Mrs. Holloway's gathering Thursday evening as planned. The idea of several days alone with Vincent would have been scandalous in Boston, but Tabitha had come to understand the different standards of frontier life. Still, she hesitated. What would people think? That I'm keeping you safe while showing you important parts of the county, Vincent replied. Sheriff knows my intentions are honorable, and folks here judge by actions more than appearances. He took her hand. But if you're uncomfortable, I understand completely. Tabitha considered for a moment. She trusted Vincent implicitly and found herself increasingly reluctant to be separated from him. The chance to see more of the territory while spending uninterrupted time together was deeply appealing. I would like to go, she decided. When would we leave? Tomorrow morning, if that suits. The sooner we start, the more likely we'll avoid the storm that's brewing. Vincent's smile was worth any potential gossip. Pack warm clothing, gets cold in the high country. They set out at dawn the next day, Tabitha once again riding Penny while Vincent led Thunder. Their saddlebags contained provisions for several days, warm blankets and other necessities. The morning air was crisp but not yet bitter, the sky clear overhead, though distant clouds to the northwest hinted at the approaching storm. First stop is the Jensen homestead, Vincent explained as they rode. Swedish family came out 3 years ago, 5 children, youngest just born last month. Want to make sure they've got enough supplies for winter. The day's journey took them through breathtaking country valleys carpeted with frost-tinged grass, forests of pine and aspen, streams already showing ice at their edges. Vincent pointed out landmarks and shared stories of the territory's history, both recent settlement and ancient indigenous presence. By mid-afternoon, they reached the Jensen homestead, a sturdy log cabin with smoke rising from the chimney and the sounds of children's voices carrying on the cold air. Their arrival was greeted with enthusiasm, the isolated family clearly delighted by visitors. Mrs. Jensen, a robust woman with a baby at her breast and flour on her apron, welcomed them inside while Mr. Jensen took charge of their horses. The cabin was warm, filled with the scent of baking bread and the evidence of a hard-working family making their mark on the frontier. "Deputy Wade brings teacher," Mrs. Jensen announced to her older children, her accent thick but her English clear enough. "You be good, show learning." The children, ranging from about 3 to 10 years old, regarded Tabitha with shy curiosity. The oldest girl eventually approached, offering a carefully printed sheet of paper. "My letters, madam," she said proudly. "Papa teaches us when farm work is done." Tabitha examined the painstakingly formed alphabet with genuine admiration. "These are excellent, especially considering you don't have regular schooling." The girl beamed at the praise, and soon all the Jensen children were showing Tabitha their modest accomplishments, simple sums, memorized Bible verses, a carefully drawn map of their homestead. Their eagerness to learn, despite their isolation, touched Tabitha deeply. Over a simple but hearty meal, Vincent discussed winter preparations with Mr. Jensen, while Tabitha helped Mrs. Jensen with the children. When the deputy inquired if they needed anything from town, Jensen hesitated, pride warring with practicality. "Medicine, maybe," he finally admitted. "Little ones get coughs in winter, and perhaps primer books for children's learning." Vincent nodded. "I'll ensure Dr. Pearson sends medicines with the next supply wagon. As for books..." He glanced at Tabitha. "I have several duplicate primers at the school," she offered immediately. "I'd be happy to send them when we return to town." The family's gratitude was palpable, reminding Tabitha of the isolation these homesteaders faced and the importance of community support, however distant. As they prepared to leave, Vincent insisting they reach the next homestead before nightfall, Mrs. Jensen pressed a loaf of freshly baked bread into Tabitha's hands. "For journey," she said firmly. "Good teacher needs strength." Back on the trail, Tabitha found herself reflecting on the Jensen family's circumstances. "They've created something remarkable out here," she observed, "so far from everything familiar." "That's the story of the West," Vincent replied. "People building new lives from nothing but determination and hard work." He glanced at her. not unlike a certain schoolteacher I know. The comparison warmed Tabitha, despite the increasingly cold wind. My challenges pale in comparison to Mrs. Jensen's. 5 children, miles from any neighbor, and still she manages to keep a clean home and bake bread. Different challenges, not lesser ones, Vincent corrected gently. Teaching 24 children with varying ages and abilities requires its own kind of courage. They visited 2 more homesteads before sunset, an elderly couple who had followed their adult children west, and a young family with twins just learning to walk. At each stop, Vincent checked on preparations for winter, offered assistance from town resources where needed, and generally reinforced the connection between these isolated settlers and the community they rarely saw. Tabitha was struck by the respect with which he was received, not just as a representative of the law, but as a man whose word and character were implicitly trusted. She also noticed how naturally he interacted with children of all ages, firm but kind, genuinely interested in their development. As darkness approached, they turned toward Vincent's cabin, now the closest shelter. The northwestern clouds had drawn closer, the wind carrying the unmistakable scent of snow. "Storm's coming faster than expected," Vincent observed, urging their horses to a slightly quicker pace. "Glad we're near home." The cabin was cold when they arrived, but Vincent quickly set about building fires in both the main room's fireplace and the kitchen stove. Tabitha unsaddled Penny as he'd taught her on previous rides, helping to settle both horses in the small barn adjacent to the cabin. By the time they carried their supplies inside, warmth was beginning to radiate through the rooms. "Make yourself comfortable," Vincent invited, hanging their coats by the door. "I'll prepare something to eat." "Let me help," Tabitha insisted. "I've watched what you're doing all day. Now it's my turn to contribute." Together, they prepared a simple but satisfying meal, venison stew made from meat Vincent had preserved earlier in the fall, accompanied by Mrs. Jensen's bread and preserved vegetables from Vincent's garden. The domesticity of the activity felt natural, as if they had been sharing such tasks for years rather than hours. As they ate by firelight, the first snowflakes began to fall outside, visible through the cabin's windows. By the time they finished their meal, the snow was coming down in earnest, the wind driving it against the glass. "Looks like we made it just in time," Vincent observed, moving to add wood to the fire. "This is the storm we've been expecting for days, might last through tomorrow." The realization that they would be snowbound together in the cabin sent a flutter of both excitement and nervousness through Tabitha. Vincent seemed to sense her thoughts, his expression growing more serious. "I'll take the small room off the kitchen," he said, his tone deliberately matter-of-fact. "You'll have the bedroom. It's warmer. Being closer to the main fireplace." "Thank you," Tabitha replied, grateful for his consideration of her comfort and reputation, even miles from the nearest neighbor. They spent the evening in comfortable conversation, Vincent sharing books from his collection that he thought might interest her, Tabitha relating amusing incidents from her classroom. Outside, the storm intensified, snow piling against the windows and wind howling around the cabin's sturdy corners. "Glad everyone's snug in their homes tonight," Vincent said, glancing toward the window. "No one should be out in this." "Does this happen often?" Tabitha asked. "Being caught by sudden storms?" "Part of life in Wyoming territory," Vincent replied. "Weather changes quickly here. Why folks like the Jensens prepare so thoroughly for winter, never know when you might be isolated for days or even weeks." The thought of being snowbound in the cabin with Vincent for an extended period sent another flutter through Tabitha, one she tried to dismiss as inappropriate. Yet there was something undeniably appealing about the cocoon of warmth they had created amid the storm's fury, this small space where they were safe together while nature raged outside. As the evening grew later, Vincent showed Tabitha to the bedroom, a simple space with a sturdy bed, a chest of drawers, and a small table with a lamp. The quilt covering the bed was clearly handmade, its pattern intricate despite the practical materials. "My mother made this," Vincent explained, noticing Tabitha's admiration of the quilt. "One of the few things I have from her." "It's beautiful," Tabitha said sincerely. She was clearly talented. Vincent's expression softened with memory. She used to say you could tell a person's character by how they pieced a quilt, whether the stitches were even, the pattern maintained even in sections no one would see. He touched the fabric gently. Taught me a lot about doing things right, even when no one's watching. The personal glimpse into his upbringing touched Tabitha deeply. She raised a good man, she said softly. Their eyes met in the lamplight, something profound passing between them. For a moment, Tabitha thought Vincent might kiss her again, but instead, he stepped back respectfully. "Sleep well, Tabitha," he said, his voice slightly rough. "If you need anything, I'm just across the cabin." "Good night." "Vincent," she replied, equally affected by the moment, "thank you for sharing your home with me." After he closed the door, Tabitha sat on the edge of the bed, touching the quilt his mother had made and thinking about the man whose quiet strength and integrity had become so important to her in such a short time. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but within these walls, she had never felt more secure. Morning arrived with brilliant sunshine reflecting off pristine snow that covered the landscape in a blinding white blanket. Tabitha woke to the scent of coffee and the sound of Vincent moving quietly in the main room, trying not to disturb her rest. When she emerged, dressed but with her hair hastily arranged, she found him preparing breakfast flapjacks cooking on the stove, bacon already crisped and waiting. "Morning," he greeted her with a warm smile. "Sleep well?" "Better than expected," she admitted. "Your mother's quilt is as comfortable as it is beautiful." "Glad to hear it." He poured her a cup of coffee. "Storm passed through faster than I thought it might. Left about a foot of snow, but the sky's clear now. Should be good traveling by midday when the sun's had time to work on the drifts." They shared breakfast companionably, making plans for the day's return journey to Silver Creek. Vincent suggested a slightly different route that would allow them to check on one more homestead while avoiding the deepest snowdrifts. As they prepared to leave, packing their few belongings and ensuring the cabin was secure, Tabitha found herself reluctant to end this interlude. Despite the modest accommodations and isolation, she had never felt more at home than in this small cabin with Vincent. "Thank you for bringing me," she said as they saddled the horses. "I've learned so much about the territory and its people." "Thank you for coming," Vincent replied, his gaze warm as it met hers. "Cabins never felt more like home than with you in it." The simple statement made Tabitha's heart race. Vincent stepped closer, taking her gloved hands in his. "Tabitha, I know this has all happened quickly. Too quickly by Eastern standards, probably." His expression was earnest. "But out here, life doesn't always give us the luxury of time. People have to recognize what matters and hold on to it." "What are you saying, Vincent?" Tabitha asked, though her heart already knew. "That I love you," he said simply. "Have almost since you stepped off that train. That I want to build a life with you, if you'll have me." The declaration, though not entirely unexpected after their growing closeness, still took Tabitha's breath away. In that moment, standing in the snow-covered yard of his homestead, with mountains rising in the distance, she knew with absolute clarity that she had found what she had never expected to find when she left Boston, not just security or purpose, but genuine, profound love. "I love you too," she replied, the words coming easily despite their significance. "And yes, it has happened quickly, but I've never been more certain of anything." Vincent's smile could have melted the snow around them. He drew her closer, his kiss more passionate than their previous exchanges, conveying all the emotion words couldn't fully express. Tabitha responded with equal fervor, her arms sliding around his neck, gloved fingers tangling in his hair. When they finally parted, both breathless, Vincent rested his forehead against hers. "I should have waited to ask properly, with a ring and on one knee," he said with a rueful laugh. "Got carried away by the moment." "I prefer honesty to ceremony," Tabitha assured him, "though I wouldn't object to the ring eventually." "Soon," he promised. "Very soon." The ride back to Silver Creek was filled with shared plans and dreams, practical discussions of their future, together interspersed with the kind of happy speculation new love inspires. They would marry after Christmas, giving them time to prepare properly. Tabitha would continue teaching, at least until children of their own might arrive. Vincent's cabin would become their home, though he spoke of additions he'd planned but never completed, now given new purpose. "Always meant to add a proper library," he said as they rode side by side through the snowy landscape. "Room just for books and reading. Now I have the perfect reason." They reached Silver Creek by late afternoon, the town already bustling with Thanksgiving preparations despite the recent snowfall. Several people greeted them as they rode down the main street, no one seeming particularly surprised to see them returning together. At Tabitha's cottage, Vincent helped her inside with her belongings, lingering at the door afterward. "Will you tell people?" Tabitha asked, suddenly conscious of the public nature of their private commitment. "Only if you wish it," Vincent replied. "Though I'll warn you, the moment I visit the silversmith in Cheyenne for a ring, the entire territory will know my intentions." Tabitha laughed, loving the directness that was so much a part of him. "Let's wait until we have that ring, then. Make it official all at once." "As you wish." Vincent kissed her briefly, mindful of their visibility from the street. "Still joining me for Thanksgiving dinner tomorrow? Thought I'd roast that turkey I've been saving, rather than just making stew." "I wouldn't miss it," Tabitha assured him. "And yes to Mrs. Holloway's gathering afterward, though I suspect she'll take one look at us and know exactly what's happened." Vincent grinned. Woman's got a sixth sense about these things, probably already planning what to wear to our wedding. After he departed, Tabitha moved about her cottage in a happy daze, unpacking her few belongings and preparing for the next day's celebration. The small space that had begun to feel like home now seemed temporary in the best possible way, a stepping stone to the future she and Vincent would build together. Thanksgiving Day dawned clear and cold, the snow from the previous day's storm glistening in the sunlight. Tabitha dressed carefully in her burgundy dress, now altered to better suit frontier life, and arranged her hair in a style that flattered without being too elaborate for a quiet dinner. Vincent arrived precisely at noon, looking more polished than usual in a clean black coat and crisp white shirt. He had clearly made an effort for the occasion, his dark hair neatly combed, his usually stubbled jaw freshly shaven. "You look beautiful," he said as Tabitha opened the door, his admiration evident. "And you look very handsome," she replied, accepting the small bouquet of evergreen branches and dried autumn flowers. He offered a creative solution to the lack of fresh blooms in November. The ride to Vincent's cabin was familiar now, though transformed by the blanket of snow that covered the landscape. They traveled in comfortable silence at times, at others sharing observations or plans. The easy companionship between them had only deepened with their declarations of love, each secure in the other's feelings. At the cabin, Vincent had clearly been busy before coming to collect her. The table was set with his best dishes mismatched but clean and carefully arranged. A fire blazed in the hearth, and the scent of roasting turkey filled the small space. "When did you manage all this?" Tabitha asked, amazed at his preparations. "Rode out at dawn," Vincent admitted. "Wanted everything ready for you." Together, they completed the meal preparations, Tabitha making gravy from the turkey drippings while Vincent finished roasting potatoes and warming the preserved vegetables from his garden. They worked in harmony, moving around each other in the small kitchen as if they had been doing so for years. When they finally sat down to their Thanksgiving feast, Vincent reached across the table to take Tabitha's hand. "I've much to be thankful for this year," he said solemnly, "but nothing more than finding you." "And I you," Tabitha replied, equally moved. "When I stepped off that train with my bag, I never imagined this would be my Thanksgiving, not just a meal, but a future I can truly be grateful for." Vincent squeezed her hand gently. "You deserved a home, not a transaction. I'm just thankful I was the one who got to offer it to you." The meal was perfect, not because of any culinary magnificence, but because of the love that infused every moment. They lingered at the table, discussing their hopes for the coming year, the improvements they would make to the cabin, the life they would build together. As afternoon began to fade toward evening, they reluctantly prepared to return to town for Mrs. Holloway's gathering. Vincent insisted on washing the dishes before they left, unwilling to return to a messy cabin. "My mother would rise from her grave to scold me if I left dirty dishes overnight," he explained with a grin. At Mrs. Holloway's, the hotel dining room had been transformed into a festive gathering place, with tables pushed together to accommodate the numerous guests, those without family nearby, travelers passing through, and a few like Vincent and Tabitha who simply wished to join the community celebration. Mrs. Holloway greeted them at the door, her shrewd eyes taking in their arrival together and the subtle changes in their demeanor. "Well, well," she said, too quietly for others to hear. "Looks like I've got another wedding to plan for soon." Tabitha felt her cheeks warm, but Vincent merely grinned. "Nothing official to announce yet, Mrs. Holloway," he said diplomatically, "but I won't deny we've been discussing possibilities." The older woman replied, clearly unconvinced by their discretion. "Well, whenever you're ready to make those possibilities known, I expect to be the first informed." The evening passed pleasantly, with good food, better company, and the warm atmosphere of a community united in gratitude. Tabitha found herself repeatedly catching Vincent's eye across the table, each glance reinforcing their private understanding amid the public celebration. As the gathering began to disperse, snow once again began to fall gently outside. Vincent helped Tabitha with her coat, using the moment of privacy near the coat rack to speak quietly. "I meant to wait, do this properly," he began, suddenly looking uncharacteristically nervous. "Had plans to visit Cheyenne next week, speak to Sheriff Hargrove formally." He reached into his pocket, "But I can't seem to wait." From his pocket he withdrew a small velvet pouch. "Belonged to my grandmother," he explained, opening it to reveal a simple gold band set with a small sapphire. "Not fancy or new, but given with all my heart." Tabitha felt tears spring to her eyes at the unexpected gesture. "Vincent, it's beautiful." "Tabitha Monroe," he said softly, holding the ring between them. "I love you. Will you marry me? Become my wife, partner, the mother of my children someday? Share whatever life brings, good or difficult?" "Yes," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "With all my heart, yes." Vincent slipped the ring onto her finger, his own hands trembling slightly with the significance of the moment. It fit as if made for her, the sapphire catching the lamplight. Their private moment was interrupted by Mrs. Holloway's delighted exclamation from across the room. "I knew it!" she declared loudly enough for everyone to hear. "Didn't I say they'd be engaged before Christmas?" Suddenly, they were surrounded by well-wishers, the entire gathering converging to offer congratulations. Sheriff Hargrove clapped Vincent on the shoulder, Mayor Thornton kissed Tabitha's cheek, and Mrs. Fleming immediately began discussing wedding dress possibilities. "Guess we're making it official after all," Vincent murmured in Tabitha's ear, his arms secure around her waist. "I wouldn't have it any other way," she replied, leaning into his embrace. Later, as Vincent walked Tabitha home through the gently falling snow, they discussed potential wedding dates. "After Christmas, but before the worst of winter sets in," Vincent suggested. "Give us time to prepare, but not so long we have to wait through blizzards." January 6th, Tabitha decided. Epiphany Sunday. It seems fitting a revelation, a new beginning. Vincent lifted her hand to kiss her fingers where his grandmother's ring now rested. January 6th it is. Not soon enough, if you ask me, but worth waiting for. At her cottage door, their goodnight kiss was filled with promise, not just of their wedding night to come, but of all the days and years that would follow. As Vincent reluctantly departed, Tabitha watched him go, her heart full of gratitude for the unexpected turn her life had taken. She had arrived in Silver Creek as a mail-order bride with a single bag, contracted to marry a man she'd never met. Instead, she'd found a home, a purpose, a community, and a love more genuine than she had ever dared to hope for. All because a deputy with kind eyes had looked at a woman alone on a platform and said, You deserve a home, not a transaction. And he had been right. The wedding of Deputy Vincent Wade and Miss Tabitha Monroe took place as planned on January 6, 1877, in Silver Creek's small church, filled to capacity with townspeople and surrounding homesteaders who braved the winter weather to attend. Tabitha wore a dress of deep ivory silk that Mrs. Fleming had ordered specially from Denver, with lace at the collar and cuffs that she'd carefully saved from her mother's wedding gown. Vincent, looking both nervous and prouder than anyone had ever seen him, wore a new black suit purchased for the occasion. Sheriff Hargrove stood as Vincent's best man, while Mrs. Holloway, who had appointed herself Tabitha's surrogate mother, bustled about adjusting the bride's veil moments before the ceremony began. The school children formed a choir, singing hymns they'd practiced diligently under Tabitha's direction in the weeks leading up to the wedding. Reverend Parker conducted the service with dignified warmth, speaking of how the union before them represented the best of frontier spirit, courage, dedication, and love that had bloomed in unexpected circumstances. When Vincent and Tabitha exchanged their vows, his strong voice contrasting with her softer tones, but both equally resolute, there wasn't a dry eye in the church. The celebration afterward at the hotel lasted well into the evening, with music, dancing, and more food than the small town usually saw in a month. The couple's first dance as husband and wife was to a waltz played by Mr. Fleming on his prized violin, Vincent guiding Tabitha with the same confidence he'd shown that first night at the Harvest Festival, though now with the intimacy of acknowledged love in every step. As the newlyweds prepared to depart for Vincent's cabin, their home now, the townspeople gathered outside, despite the cold, tossing wheat kernels for prosperity, and offering final good wishes. James Blackwood, who had become one of Tabitha's most dedicated students, presented them with a hand-carved wooden box he'd made himself. "For important papers and such," he explained shyly. "Uncle Henry taught me woodworking." "It's beautiful, James," Tabitha said sincerely, touched by the gift. "We'll treasure it." Vincent helped Tabitha into the sleigh he'd borrowed for the occasion, tucking warm buffalo robes around her before taking the reins. As they pulled away from town, the bells on the horse's harness jingling in the crisp night air, Tabitha leaned against her husband's shoulder. "Happy, Mrs. Wade?" Vincent asked, his arms secure around her. "Happier than I ever imagined possible," Tabitha replied, looking up at the stars brilliant in the Wyoming sky. "And this is just the beginning." Their life together unfolded with the changing season spring, bringing new growth to Vincent's garden, now expanded with Tabitha's help, summer filled with improvements to the cabin, including the promised library addition, autumn heralding their first anniversary and the news that they would become parents by the following spring. Tabitha continued teaching until her condition became too advanced, beloved by her students and respected throughout the county for her dedication to education. Vincent's reputation as a fair and capable lawman grew, eventually leading to his appointment as sheriff when Hargrove retired in 1880. Their first child, a daughter they named Elizabeth after Vincent's mother, arrived in April of 1878, followed 2 years later by a son, Thomas, named for Tabitha's father. As their family grew, so did their homestead. Additional rooms added to the cabin, a larger stable built, more land cultivated. Through the years, they remained pillars of the Silver Creek community, their home always open to those in need, their commitment to each other deepening with each challenge and joy they faced together. The sapphire ring never left Tabitha's finger, joined in time by a simple gold band that represented promises kept and a love that had grown from unexpected beginnings into something as enduring as the Wyoming landscape itself. And sometimes, on quiet evenings when the children were asleep and they sat together by the fire in the home they had built both physically and emotionally, Vincent would take Tabitha's hand, his thumb brushing over her wedding ring, and say, "Best words I ever spoke were on that platform when you arrived. You deserve a home, not a transaction. Tabitha would quote back to him, her eyes soft with memory and love. And look what we found instead, Vincent would reply, drawing her close. Something worth far more than either of us ever dreamed.